Hey historians, Mr. Birch here. Today we're going to be talking about the Treaty of Paris in 1783, and also we're going to talk about why this painting never got finished. When you see the question, press pause, take a moment to read and answer, then press play, and we'll go over it together. Let's get started. What was one result of the Treaty of Paris of 1783? F. Great Britain recognized the United States as an independent country. Competing Seminole and Spanish claims in West Florida were resolved. The British Navy agreed to stop pressing American sailors into service. British territory in eastern Canada was ceded to France. So as always, what is the question asking? That's the first thing we need to know, right? This one's a rather short question, so there's not a lot to look at. We need to know what the Treaty of Paris in 1783 caused. What was the result of that? So the thing that we're focusing on here is 1783. Well, if we know that 1776, the United States declared independence from Great Britain, then they had to continue fighting in a war that lasted until a major battle, and then eventually, okay, that kind of helps us know where we need to be here. So first, what do? What can we eliminate? Well, the British Navy agreed to stop pressing American sailors into service. Well, if we know anything about U.S. history, we know that in 1812, the British were pressing American sailors into service, but these were Americans who were part of the United States. This was all the way in 1812. And then these were British. They were two separate countries at this point. So that just doesn't make sense here. That's not in 1783. That's many years later. Also, let's see this. The Seminole, which is a Native American group, and the Spanish were fighting over West Florida. Doesn't make sense that they would meet in Paris. This one, that just doesn't fit here. So what do we have to know? Well, Great Britain recognized the United States as an independent country. This makes sense when we start to put the timeline into U.S. history. The American Revolutionary War started in 1775 and officially ended in 1783 at the Treaty of Paris. The Second Continental Congress declared independence from the British in 1776. Again, remember, declaring that you're independent doesn't necessarily mean you are. If you declare you're independent from a greater power, usually you're going to have to fight for it after that, as the Americans did. The Americans had to fight for it for many years, in fact, until the British surrendered to General Washington's troops in Yorktown. They not only surrendered to General Washington, but the French Navy was there to kind of blockade them in on both sides. And that happened in 1781. So it took about 2 years. It started in 1782 when some American delegates were meeting with the Spanish, the French, and the British, because if you remember, Spain and France were fighting Great Britain as well, in Paris, trying to work these things out. Eventually, in 1783, the Treaty of Paris was signed, and here we have a map. We see what the land of North America was claimed and who claimed ownership of it in 1775, the Spanish and the British, namely. And then in 1783, after the Treaty of Paris, these are the post-war boundaries. You see the British has west or eastern and most of what is today Canada. The Spanish claimed, well, the same thing they pretty much claimed before, except a little bit more of Florida here, modern-day Florida. And then the United States had the land all the way from the east coast to the Mississippi River. Oh, and that painting that we saw at the beginning, that was never finished because that was a painting of the actual signing of the Treaty of Paris. If you've ever had to pose for a picture you didn't want to pose for, imagine posing for a painting when you had to pose signing away the rights to your land after losing a war while somebody painted you the entire time. The British officers didn't want to pose for that, so the painting never got finished.